Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another Talk Architecture podcast episode, and I'm your host, Naziati Muhammad Yaqub. Today we're going to talk about neurodivergent spaces. Now, there are two articles that I will be referring to when I discuss about this today, and also my take on spaces for those with cognitive or learning disabilities. Now, usually we just commonly use the word neurodivergent as opposed to neurotypical. So, and I would interchangeably use these words. And please excuse me if I have done it incorrectly, but I try to be respectful to people who are neurodivergent, in which I myself am also included, apart from being physically disabled. Now, the thing I like to talk about is two things, because one article is more about when they say the word design, they are talking about by design. I mean, by intention, by planning, or by what is being given that society excludes autistic people. So it's focused on autistic people. And the other article is a general article which I found on the neurodiverse workplace, a space for all to thrive. So it's more to do with the space, to do with specific details than the first article. But I'm going to talk from the point of view of the first article, and I'll give respect to the author Eva Redford, written in August 15, 2026. It's such a new article just produced, and it's found in LinkedIn. The title is How Society Excludes Autistic People by Design, and bracket research-based analysis. So it is an essay that applies the institutional legitimacy framework, which is trademark, to autism across education, employment, healthcare, public life, and relationships. So this is something that how we see things. Perhaps we can borrow this lens when we think about how we would like to understand an environment that is sympathetic to autistic people. So this particular piece tried to place all these different scenarios side by side to trace the larger pattern that they share, how institutions turn neurological difference into disadvantage by treating one narrow model of human functioning as normal. So in the spectrum, you have just one aspect, one that is deemed to be normal and the rest not normal, obviously. So her analysis is grounded in research with a full source list included at the end of the article for readers who want to explore evidence for that. So I like to go to like a paragraph that at the end of the essay, or a few paragraphs, and we'll talk again. But before we go to the last paragraph or so, she listed several criteria And she listed this criteria. I'm going to just give you the subtopics. Because in the summary, she would say that it is worth distinguishing precisely because what it is that we want to look at what institution sees autistic people and what the problems really is because individual bias and institutional bias are not the same failure wearing different clothes. Individual bias says you are different, so I would judge you differently. It is visible, personal, and at least in principle, arguable with. However, institutional bias says something quieter and harder to locate. The rules are the same for everyone. What that claim leaves out is that the rules were designed around one kind of person, a specific communication style, a specific sensory tolerance, a specific pace of participation, and then presented as a neutral once that design choice was no longer visible as a choice at all. The standard does not merely measure difference from itself, it converts that difference into a disadvantage automatically without requiring anyone in the building to hold a biased thought. So this is the assertion that the author pushes, where the criterias are: number one, communication built for one kind of reader. Number two, when legibility is mistaken for credibility. Number three, why autistic people are disbelieved. Number four, the environment that disappears from the diagnosis. Number five, public life was never part of the design brief. Number six, administrative weight behind ordinary participation. Number seven, employability before ability. Number eight, AI automates the same pattern. Number 9, the student education rewards. 10, performing illness to be believed. 11, when exclusion comes home. 12, conditional participation. 13, what this costs. What this costs goes on. And then 14, you become your own institution. 15, you're redesigning the person instead of the design. 16, when redesign is only a brand. 17, what a redesign actually looks like. 18, what the system loses. And then you'll have all the references at the end of the essay. So I like to say to read the end. Like I mentioned before, so she mentioned Irving Genesis' classic research on groupthink that showed how cohesive groups become vulnerable to poor decisions precisely when argument is valued over challenge, and dissent becomes socially costly to raise. A person who does not fall into step with consensus simply because consensus has already formed is not by default disrupting the group. They may be the only one positioned to notice what agreement has made harder to see. An institution that filters out autistic participation because it reads differently, it's not becoming more efficient. It's quietly reducing its own capacity to notice when it is wrong. No one tells most autistic people early enough for it to matter that normal was designed. So many grow up believing every mismatch is evidence of a personal failure. Too sensitive, too intense, too direct, too much, not enough. The words vary. The verdict underneath them really does. But what if some of those shortcomings were never shortcomings at all? What if there were collisions with a system built around one narrow prototype of how a person is supposed to communicate, learn, work, behave, and belong, a prototype nobody voted on, and nobody had to because it never had to announce itself as a choice. Normal is not neutral, it never was, and sometimes the most important reframe available is also the simplest one. Not that the difficulty was imagined, but it was never proof of failure to begin with. The system was only ever designed to recognize someone else. So, working in accessibility standards and universal design, and also trying to go beyond universal design when I look at sensory design, it amazes me. It amazes me in the same way that it baffles me that for universal design principles, you don't talk about neurodivergent needs or that you deal with anything to do with neurodivergence or neurodivergent people. So I got to figure that out myself. I got to find out from experience talking to a mother who is an architect as well, who designed a building for autistic children and people. So I understood about the environment needing to be less extreme, the choice of colors maybe more for pastel. You need to be mindful of designing so that acoustically, so that that it's not too noisy. Extreme in hearing, extreme in vision, not glaring or garish colors, smell, taste, and touch. So in a sense, it has to be comforting. It provides not sameness, but different kind of ways of working. If it's a place where you have a place to work, you are not looked at or seen to be, it is not a strange thing. You need to accept, the whole working condition, the team, the other colleagues need not be raising eyebrows or seem to think that their colleague who is autistic is weird if they want to work on the floor, for example, or want to work at the sofa, or they do different ways of, or they find different places to work because of the environment. They have to adjust the environment. So this whole thing is about relationships, working relationships between people as well as the environment. So what the article by Miss Eva Redford does is giving us a lot to think and telling us the patterns that happens when the environment is not designed for people with neurodivergence or autistic people specifically. So there's a good read to look at, and I do profess or confess that I don't know much about designing for autistic people. And then we have another article which I explain about the the title is Neurodiverse Workplace, a Space for All to Thrive. This article is at www.ie-uk.com blog, the Neurodiverse Workplace's general article. And the article acknowledges that there is no one size fits all approach to workplace design. I talk about workplace design because I am interested in what's happening to workspaces. In general, those are the places where things can happen, which there could be injustice for autistic people if it was not designed for them in mind, but the default design of neurotypical people. So, in recent years, more focus be given to creating workspaces that support the full range of neurodiversity in employees. So, there's this blog post that I'm reading now, explores why organizations must put the needs of neurodiverse individuals at the forefront when designing their workplaces and how to do it. So, neurodiversity is gaining traction. Approximately 15 to 20% of people are neurodivergent, which is have one of a collection of conditions that includes autism, spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and dyslexia. So this comes from Designing a Neurodiverse Workplace, HOK. Neurodiversity is the idea that the human brains don't come in a one-size-fits-all normal package. It refers to a variation regarding learning, attention, mood, and other mental functions. So the neurodiversity movement emerged during the 1990s to increase acceptance and inclusion of all individuals while celebrating and embracing neurological differences. More recently, there's been a growing awareness of the importance of neurodiversity and the unique strengths and perspectives that neurodivergent individuals can bring to the workplace. So you can download the blueprint for inclusive workplaces here. So the subtopic of a competitive advantage. Research shows that when neurodiverse individuals are given the support and accommodations they need, they can bring exceptional talent to the workplace like creative storytelling, coding, empathy, and pattern recognition. Leading companies like Microsoft, SAP, and EY even have dedicated hiring programs to attract individuals with autism. Microsoft's neurodiversity hiring program is one of the most notable initiatives in the area. It began as a pilot project in 2015 and has since grown to include hundreds of employees across the company, as well as supporting a better experience for autistic employees. The program also focuses on educating and raising awareness across the entire company about autism and neurodiversity. By valuing and supporting the unique contributions of all employees, these companies are creating more inclusive, innovative, and successful spaces. A successful organization. We talk about people who are autistic that are able to be working. They're in the spectrum, but they're able to be working with other people. They produce. They are highly sought after individuals who could help an organization thrive. You also have people who have ADHD and dyslexia. So you're looking at neurodiversity in that term. Non-verbal autistic people would have challenges with working in, shall we say, an environment that was designed to be neurotypical. But for those who are neurodivergent, there are problems working in the neurotypical office in which they try to fit in, but it's actually the environment could be changed for them so that it can thrive better in, or at least don't have the judgment or don't have the discrimination imposed on them in the way that meeting is conducted, in the social programs, and so on. So we go for another part of the article on neurodiverse workplace, the subtopic of space for all. So the trouble is many traditional office environments are designed in ways that can be overwhelming or distracting for neurodiverse individuals, which can impede their ability to work effectively. The modern workplace is challenging for many people. The bustle and noise that comes with an open plan office can be distracting for those who need quiet to do their best work. I've seen quite a number of people getting away from the open plan office, and somehow they manage to work in common areas or just a vacant room to do their best work. But for people with neurodivergent conditions like dyslexia, autism, and ADHD, it can be a great hindrance. Neurodiverse people tend to be over or understimulated by parts of their environment, such as noise, lighting, texture, smells, and temperature. I mentioned about this before, and that's what I understand from my architect come mother of an autistic child designing a center for autistic people. So that was very, very consciously designing for them. And so there's this over understimulation issues of the environment. This makes background noise and bright lighting, for example, common problems, which was what I garnered from also a neurodivergent individual. Designing for neurodiversity is one of the subtopics here. It includes on spatial design, spatial character, acoustic quality, and then thermal comfort, lighting, degree of stimulation. There is a quote here by the Sean Gilroy, head of neurodiversity and cognitive design at the BBC, who says it's also important to consider cognitive accessibility in workplace design, where he said, a lot of organizations are good at physical accessibility, but considering cognitive accessibility isn't really well appreciated. This checklist takes into account visual design, so the use of patterns and colors and the contrast of those things, such as shiny surfaces and the way that light comes through windows and creates reflections. There's also the audio consideration. Open plan offices are cited as being a poor environment for people with neurodivergent condition. We've often got tactile issues, that material that we use, and thinking about the type of mouse or laptop, or what kind of wrist guards, mouse mats or chairs. We also have the olfactory consideration, the smells of food or cleaning products. How do they affect people? So the power of choice is the next topic. So that, like I said earlier, when you do your work, sometimes you don't feel like sitting in the open plan office. You want to do it somewhere much more secluded. So they did mention about sensory rooms and calming and soothing environment for workers who may be overwhelmed by sensory input. Quiet spaces offering employees a space to work in a more peaceful, focused environment. Visual aids, color-coded signage, and large, clear text help individuals with different visual needs to navigate the workspace more easily. You must consider that neurodivergent individuals could also have some sensory disability, like vision impairment. Yeah. So Flexible workspaces. A range of flexible spaces include standing desks, accommodate the needs of workers with different physical needs. Supportive culture beyond the physical features. Managers and colleagues receive training to help them support neurodiverse employees and create a more inclusive and successful workplace culture. So the idea is to push neurodiversity up the agenda and create a better workplace environment. So you have companies like Microsoft already putting that policy in place, and the value that individuals with autism could provide as a worker or employee in a company. So treat this podcast today as something for you to actually start your research on neurodivergent people and the environment that they could thrive on and their needs, but acknowledging that by design, most environment are not supportive of neurodivergent people's needs. And the other article by Ms. Redford, we're looking at neurodivergent individuals who could be more, shall we say, disabled, which, and the multiple disabilities issues that I mentioned just now. The sensitivity to actually wanting to assist and support individuals in the workplace is the first step, really. Guidelines help for us to be aware, and head of departments or bosses and supervisors and the CEOs, obviously, with the human resource department, they need to be aware of neurodivergent needs in workplaces. And, the problem is usually when trying to ask for your needs or come out as a complaint, come out as you're a troublemaker in the organization, doesn't help with how you could thrive, how you could contribute, and is unfairly being judged in a way of key performance indicators at the end of the day. So we need to have a fair-minded approach to helping neurodivergent individuals to be thriving in a working environment. So therefore, I would like to conclude this podcast session for today. Thank you very much for listening. See you again.